Welcome back to Ampersand Unique Gifts and Home Decor. Or if this is your first time here, I'm glad that you've stopped by. I hope you'll consider clicking subscribe and that notification bell so that you'll be notified every time we upload new videos. Today I have two small furniture flips. We're going to do some repairs, we're going to paint, and then we're going to add some IOD transfers to help give them their and in this life. So if you like DIYs, if you like trash to treasure, if you like upcycles and repurpose, if you like thrift flips, thrift hauls, thrifting, organizational videos, you're definitely in the right spot and you're going to like it here. So stick around, add anything in the comments about what you would have done differently or any advice that you have or even anything you would like to see me go over in the future. And I will see you on the flip side. All right, here's our first piece. It is actually a mid-century table. It is not antique, but it has that look. It is a reproduction, but a mid-century reproduction. It has some veneer damage, has a little bumps and bruises. The biggest damage is around the feet, and it's where it's put together in pieces, and it has, this actually has some completely coming apart, but I think it's just where that glue has worn and dried. This piece was outside, and I'm just going to give it, not outside here, clarifying that it was not outside here. It was in storage, hence all that dust, and I'm just cleaning the top really well with some Krud Kutter. I think some of that dark that you're seeing is actually where the stain is coming off, and I'm going to sand off that old clear coat. It was just very gummy, and I want to make sure to give it a good, easy, light sanding. I don't want to get into the veneer. And then I'm going to seal it in, and this is actually polyurethane because I wanted to have a clear coat, and that was just what I found. But I was out of shellac, which is what I normally use. So here is the most damaged leg, and when I was sanding, I pushed down too hard, and actually it broke off completely. My favorite part of these little feet, but what's happened in the past when I've tried to remove the feet is it actually tore them up or it was hard to get them back on. In this case, I'm just going to leave them on there. I'm getting ready to paint it all after I fix it. So I'm just kind of looking to see if I need to do anything additional. I'm trying to get that piece back in. It kind of shredded there at the top. I'm going to put it back together using Tightbond 2, I think, wood glue. And I'm just making sure that I get that wood glue down in every single possible piece that's going to connect. And I'm going to put it both on the leg and on the piece that broke off. And we will get that in there and clamp it together and allow that to dry. And that when that Tightbond glue dries, it's going to be as tight or even better than it was to start with. So I decided that I needed a few additional clamps because not only, there's no real way, given the curve of these legs, there's not really a good way to clamp that together. So I'm clamping it from a different direction and trying to make sure that I get that covered in there. But I'm kind of using the glue almost as a wood filler a little bit here and just making sure again, anywhere that it's coming apart. So the leg itself is made out of several pieces. It has a little inlay almost in the inside. It's not a design or a pattern, it's another piece of the same color wood. But I'm just going to put glue all down in there and let it seep in both from the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to clamp it together and let it dry. I am wiping off the excess as best as I can. So while the clamps are on there, I'm going to go ahead and sneak in some plastic wood. And this is just a wood filler that I thought would be beneficial where it had that break and it had kind of a little bit of where it broke, and I tried to stick it back together like a puzzle piece, but it still had a little bit of a groove. And I actually do use this plastic wood in several places, mostly in that middle section where that piece had kind of sunk down into it, but it dries really fast and it sands very smooth and is very tough and hard. This plastic wood is really good stuff. So anyway, I went ahead and put it in here where the veneer was missing on this part of it, and again some other places on the legs, and where there weren't really significant divots, I just went ahead and sanded it smooth. And this is it was mostly a place in the clear coat that was missing, not necessarily within the wood itself. So I'm sanding it very lightly just with some 220. And then I'm going to use that same polyurethane. I typically would use shellac, and like I said, I didn't have any. And so I'm using polyurethane because it's a little bit tougher than it would be just using a regular matte clear coat. And I am doing this so that when I begin painting, it's not going to come through and bleed through into my paint. I could not get this to focus, but it is Crockery. If you guys have been following me, then you've heard me say this already, and you've seen that this is my new favorite color of the season. I have been painting everything in this beautiful, neutral, natural color. It doesn't give that bright white, but it's just a wonderful old style, kind of a taupey color. There are furniture repairs that are real furniture, refinishers that are having panic attacks all over the world right now, and they don't even know why. So please forgive me if, you are having a heart attack that I did this and that I painted this. That is my style. That is what I like. The wonderful thing about this paint, this is the DIY, Debbie's Design Diary DIY brand paint. This is the all-in-one that has the built-in sealer. It is in conjunction with Jamie Ray Vintage. It is the Cottage color crockery. So but the point is, it is not harming it. So if somebody wished to go ahead and take this back to its original state, this paint is very safe. It has, 9 ingredients. It's, this is a wonderful paint to use on a piece like this because you know that it is not damaging. It is not like the old style latex paint, etc. But I'm going to go ahead, and what I end up doing is 2 coats all over, and that is sufficient coverage for sure. But when I was painting, I realized the veneer around the bottom of the entire tabletop was starting to split. So I'm using Starbond glue with the accelerant, and here I'm actually doing it while the table is still up. I did have enough sense to lay it down on its side and go the rest of the way around it. And again, 1 coat probably would have been fine. This all-in-one paint has that built-in sealer there, and it covered wonderfully. I didn't have any bleed through, but I am going to go ahead and just use 2 coats, giving it that extra coverage to make sure that everything is sealed in very well. And I'm just using a chip brush and kind of slapping the paint on in there. I'm not going for a fresh, brand new piece of furniture. You can get that somewhere else. I'm looking for something that has that old style. Looks like this paint has been on there forever. I'm taking my scraper, and anywhere that there was a drip or run, and I'm going back and forth between a sanding block that has a piece of 150 actually wrapped around it, and then this piece here is 220. It's very old and worn out. And I'm just kind of getting a little bit everywhere. I want it to have that chip look. I want it to look like this paint has been on there forever, that this was an old antique, and that it has just been through its life. And I'm actually using a wet wipe, and you can see that while it does take a little extra elbow grease, you can kind of wet distress it a little bit. Not like the clay-based paint, the regular Debbie's Design Diary clay-based paint. This one does because of that sealer. It does definitely add a little challenge if you try to wet distress, but I would use my wet wipe, and then I would come back in and use my very worn out piece of 220, and then use my wet wipe, and it gave me that exact look that I wanted of an old chippy piece. So I am doing the same thing here, and I'm going to go all the way around the top. Switching over to the next step, I'm adding the Sweet Pickins Wax in the color Dark, and I'm using an old shoe shine brush, and I am shoving it down in all of that texture, because what's going to happen is I'm going to take my lint-free rag, which in this case I've just cut up an old t-shirt. It is absolutely the best material I have found to use to wipe off the wax and clean it up. But the goal is that I'm going to wipe it off the top, and it's going to leave that wax down inside any of the grooves. This is true of any of the paint strokes, you know, where you can see any of the brush strokes or anything like that. And I'm going to go over this entire piece doing that same thing, adding it in, getting it in all the cracks and the grooves, and then coming back and wiping off the excess.
My lungs, give me air, give me some peace, oh darling please, oh darling please. Waking all the changes, I'm loving still. Working to a million pieces. Looking at me. Willing through the changes. We cannot be. Give me tears so I can cry.
And now the really fun part. We are going to add some flowers to the top of this. So I'm using the new spring release IOD transfer, the Collage de Fleurs, and trying to decide, do I use that natural color and just kind of stick with the natural theme, or do I want to use something with a little bit more pink, or do I want to use something, do I want to use the dark red pictures and flowers there in the center of my piece? So let me know in the comments, which one would you have chosen? Because obviously here I picked the peonies. I liked that pink. It had that natural in the middle, and it really tied in beautifully with that crockery color of our table. And the thing about IOD transfers that is wonderful, you can layer them. So what I'm doing here, I have put the first one down and I'm adding in that second one, kind of overlapping it a little bit so that they're all facing different directions for a kind of a centerpiece. And I'm just taking the plastic transfer stick that came with it, and after you remove the backing and then you put it down, then you're going to continue to rub, and then you're going to use that plastic to burnish it down, and that's just making sure that it is connected and touching everywhere. So now that I have all three flowers on there, and I actually had to add the bumblebee because it was a little off center and I needed kind of something to help bring that in together. But I used that extremely worn 220 sandpaper to sand it off because I wanted to make sure that it went with it. You know, I didn't want this old distressed table and then this brand new looking painted top. So I did distress that just a little bit back. Now I'm adding that same dark wax into those corners there. And I'm going to put a little bit of it all over the top. And again, you know, you need to seal in your transfer. You don't need to seal in this paint. This does have a built-in sealer in this crockery color. So the purpose of this wax is not to seal it. It is to actually give it that aged look. But I do need to seal in my transfer on the top. So I used that dark wax and then I came back with some clear wax over top of it to kind of erase it.
You come and wake me every night. You say you missed the concept of you and I, you and I. You come and wake me every night. You say you missed the concept of you and I.
So I hope you loved project number 1 as much as I did. This is project number 2. It's an old jelly cabinet that I picked up at the auction. You can see the duct tape with the seller's number on it, and the top is broken into 2 pieces. The front door is also split, but both of these they have repairs, and they are not new repairs. Unfortunately, the top is going to break off. This one, however, I do not intend to do anything with. It has had that board put across there, and it is holding that door, and I love the character of that split. But the top here is definitely going to have to come off and be replaced because it's just done for. And you can see there were additional nails. There were new nails that were put in there in an attempt to hold it on without doing anything any different. But we're going to take it off. We're just going to go ahead. That I just pulled off with my hand very easily. But here I'm just kind of taking a hammer from the bottom, and it'd probably be easier if I would just set the camera down, which I eventually do. But look at this. I don't know how old this is, but this is put together with hand forged nails. So that is really exciting. So I'm not sure how old this is. Maybe it's, you know, I don't know. Anyway, we're going to give it a good scrubbing. As you could tell, it was very dirty. So I'm taking it out here and I am using Krud cutter and a scrub brush and getting all the spider webs off. It had actual live, like the spider nest stuff that gets in the corners, and I picked that off. And anyway, yep, just giving it a good scrubbing, and the top sprayer quit working on my bottle, so I ended up just pouring the Krud cutter on there and using my brush, and then I'm going to rinse it off very well and leave it out here in the sun to dry. While that's drying, we're going to go back in, and I'm holding the two pieces of the top together and using them as a pattern to cut from a pine board. This is what's left of a pine board that I had, and I wanted to go ahead and cut the top off, but I didn't want it to look like a brand new top on this old worn cabinet. So here I am giving it a little character. Of course, my tripod is sitting on the workbench, so every time I pound it, it gives it a little earthquake there. Using one of those old nails to scrape it. I've added my hammer bend. I'm going to take, this is my paint can opener, and I'm putting it with the end down and giving it a good smack with the hammer. Going to scrape on the edges. And then I even use an actual scraper and scrape some of that wood off of there. Here we go. There. I'm going to, try to really give it a nice worn look. I want it to make sure that this wonderful old cabinet doesn't suddenly have this brand new top. So then I'm going to sand the edges to kind of give that worn edge. I definitely don't want anything to have a fresh cut. That's not the way the rest of the cabinet looks. And as I'm going on the corners, I decide I need a little extra. So we're going to take my hammer and we're going to pound in these corners. I could continue to just sand it, but hammering it. Here, I just really wanted to show you, look at that old crackle. That's what we work so hard to fake and to replicate, but that is original. So I am going to give the entire cabinet a sand. I don't want to get rid of its beautiful patina, but I just want it to at least be clean and fresh. So when it goes to its new home, it doesn't look like, this old thing that came out of storage all dirty, and that it has a nice fresh look, but it still has that wonderful, primitive, look and appearance going. I have a little bit of repair to do here. So I'm going to take my Tightbond 2 glue, and I'm going to take a corner clamp, and I am going to fix that. Here you go. I had to set the camera down to do that, but this is what it's like with the clamp on there. Those corner clamps are handy. And of course, when you have a shop that has a door to the outside, mud daubers like to find every hole. So I just thought I'd share with you the mud daubers nest that apparently took place. So instead of nailing the top back on, I am going to, and forgive me, I don't know what these are actually called. My husband used a reference and I cannot remember, but it's where you're going to put corners in there. And so I'm not putting a nail through the top. I'm actually going to bring it up from the bottom. So I'm going to hook those. They're going to go in the corner. And I found these old pieces of wood in the scrap pile. It was something my husband cut off from something else that he was doing. And it has that perfect 90 degrees that I need. So I cut those up and put those in. So my top, even though I'm going to be painting the entire piece black, I didn't want that bright, light colored, almost white pine coming through there. So I am using the antique, it's Waverly wax in the color antique, and I'm watering it down to help glide it on there and make sure that it gets in all of those little dents and grooves. And so I just kind of go a little bit with water, a little bit with my antique wax, and I do both top and bottom to completely cover it to help bring it back and look a little bit more like what the wood looks like here. And so I've already attached both with a screw and the glue. I used wood glue here, and now I'm taking some screws and getting them ready. I'm coming up from the bottom with my screws. I had to use a little short screwdriver because everything else I tried, I kept hitting the shelf. But I'm getting ready to put that top on. And again, I will glue around the edge there, and I will put that top on it, and then I will screw those screws up through the top so that it holds it on very secure, but the top is smooth and you don't see those nail holes. I could have taken a brad nailer and nailed it back down and then filled the top with wood filler, but I just decided to go about it this way so that the top would be smooth and go that way. Here I am putting on the black paint. You can't hardly tell here because it's the black paint over the black piece, But this is is a DecoArt Americana. The color is Carbon. It is one of my favorite chalk paints to use in the color black. Because that wood, even though I put that wax over this wood, it is still just going to soak that paint up so much because it is still a little bit raw. So I used water to just help glide that paint on. Once I get it on there, I want to go back and distress it. I want to be able to see all those bumps and bruises so that the cabinet itself still has that beautiful old antique appearance, but is nice and fresh.
Come and wake me every night. You say you've missed the concept of you and I, you and I.
Now that everything is sanded and wiped clean, I am going to use the IOD Be Thou My Vision transfer. And I honestly have no idea how long I've had this. I found it in my stash, but it is an 8 by 14. So it's the perfect size to put on the front of this cabinet. I think the verbiage and everything goes great with my primitive style. So like with all the IOD transfers, they come with an applicator stick, this plastic stick that you'll use to rub it down. It kind of went a little crooked there and had a little bubble in it, so that's why I cut it, just to make sure that I cut where there was no lettering so that I could put it back down and I didn't have to worry about it causing a bubble in my letters. But I'm just going to push down and apply it all in there, making sure that all the letters stick. The piece has got kind of some chips and wear to it, so you can see there's some places that didn't stick in that. But no problem, we're just going to seal it down. I think it just kind of lends to the age of the piece because, again, we don't want it to look like it has a new painted design on an old cabinet. So that just worked out perfectly. So we're taking, this is the container that my chalk paint was in, and I just added a little water and then shook it up to kind of get the paint off the sides. And now I am adding the Waverly wax in the color Antique to it. And I'm going to add a little bit more water just to kind of create almost like a wash. And I'm going to use this to seal my entire piece. So unlike the other that had a built-in sealer, this paint does not. So with this chalk paint, I have to make sure to seal it. And this wax makes the perfect sealant for chalk paint. And then, of course, obviously, even if it did have a sealant within the paint, you always want to make sure to seal in your transfer. So I'm going to cover the entire piece, including the inside. I'm going to let it dry a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and buff it, and I just use a shoe shine brush to do my buffing. I don't actually show that here, but I wanted to tell you. So again, I lather it on there really well, really thick. I make sure to get every part of it. And then I take a dry rag. After I've covered everything, I take a dry rag and come back, which is just another t-shirt, and I wipe back the excess. But I hope that you love it as much as I do. Here you go.